Hello, YouTube. I just got an upgraded laptop, so movies and TV shows are being added to the roster. So this analysis is purely for the television show The Last of Us. I'm not familiar with the video game and don't care how they compare. I don't know how much of the story was taken from the games or how much liberty the show writers took. It doesn't matter anyway. The show and games are separate pieces of work. So the writing for this show is so impressive that it's almost textbook. Instead of giving a general overview, I'd rather home in on one of the show's strongest elements, the character work. There's no better episode to dig into than this to really see how immaculate the work is. Before we tackle the character work, I need to point out the brilliant design of the framing device, and I normally hate those. This one, however, happens smoothly, starting with the characters we've been following the first 2 episodes since the start of the show. They're who we know, who we've spent time around, and to replace them so soon for an entire episode, this should be jarring, but it's handled so gently that it almost goes unnoticed. When I speak about the point of transition, I'm referring to the object or person that the audience focuses on while everything else shifts. By having a point of transition, the author can maintain the audience's attention and prevent disorientation during severe shifts in a story. The direct point of transition for this episode isn't on a single object or person. Instead, it's an event. The starting point is the end of the event, showing the fate of a group of people. Using the mother and child to visually ground the transition allows the strongest emotional connection possible in the shortest amount of time, and that connection carries over when the scene shifts back in time. We've heard the story of what happened, and we know the fate of the mother and child, so when the story moves to the real focus, Bill, we're now captured by the intrigue with zero reason to wonder about our point of transition. This handoff is flawless. What helps this handoff is the lead up to the point of transition. The process of transferring the audience's attention from Joel and Ellie to Bill and Frank doesn't even technically have a beginning. The episode starts with Joel and Ellie heading to see Bill and Frank for refuge while out in the dangerous world. The fact that they're heading there doesn't feel out of place, and it isn't jarring when the scene shifts back to them in the end. Even the lead up to the story itself was crafted to make the transition smooth. Coming across a downed airplane ignited Ellie's interest in the past and what had happened. So when we hear the story about what happened to the townspeople, it doesn't stand out as unusual or a preamble to the transition. There are also no strange character decisions leading to the audience finding out about the mass grave. Instead, we have a father figure being himself.
There's stuff up there you shouldn't see.
And an obstinate 12-year-old being herself.
Be too honest, man. Should have said axe murderer.
It's organic because the characters remain true to who they are, as do all characters in this show. The overall point in this analysis on Bill and Frank can be applied to all characters. To illustrate what I feel is a good design for a character, the mushroom stem represents the moral framework by which a person lives, and the cap represents behavior. The possible options for how a person will behave is restrained by moral framework, barring any mental illness. To be clear, this is very much a boiled down general explanation. Designing a character is far more complex than this. So let's begin with Frank. We first meet him stuck in a hole, trying to decide if he should lie. For both Bill and the audience, it sounds as though he's being honest, but he could also be planning to attack Bill. There's a good deal of tension wrapped around this scene, so the authors do a great job introducing him with just as much intrigue as they use to introduce Bill. Once Frank is out of the hole, he pushes to get something to eat. It's not shown on screen, but I'm sure he also pushed to take a shower, pushed for another 5 minutes in the shower, and took it upon himself to push a singing session, to name a few things. When he first starts pushing, he's doing so with a man he knows nothing about during an apocalyptic time frame where people left are survivors for a reason. Frank boldly requested for something to eat from someone pointing a gun at him. This is a man confident in his skills, and that would only be because he spent some time honing them. After Bill and Frank have been together for some years, they have a fight in the middle of the street, and Frank says,
"Do I ask for things? Ever?"
But we'd just seen him ask for multiple things. And in the beginning, he'd done so with conviction, starting in the first few seconds of meeting Bill. Also, he tells Bill that
Paying attention to things. It's how we show love.
implying that he wanted to get certain things simply because he wanted to pretty up the place. It turns out that Frank had invited guests over and wanted the place to look nice for them, not himself. Remember when we first met Frank and he claimed to be a terrible liar?
You already know I'm bad at lying.
Well, that was a lie. He lied several more times before his and Bill's argument out in the street, but those could have been seen as little white lies or fudging the truth in favor of politeness. I could even understand someone not prone to manipulating, doing what they could to stay in a comfortable and safe place during an apocalypse. All of that, however, is no longer possible with this argument. Frank had no pressing reason to lie except to control Bill's response and therefore get what he wants.
It is not
Bill,
a man.
You say resource management? So help me, I will run through one of your tripwires.
The writers took the comedic route with how the conversation wraps up, but it's only funny because it fits something Frank would do. The authors expertly reveal his character through how he interacts with Bill. Frank is who he is up until the very end. When Bill hears about Frank's decision to opt out of the post-apocalypse, Bill is devastated. When Frank hears about Bill's decision, well, he says,
I should be furious.
but then he also says,
But from an objective point of view, it's incredibly romantic.
and his actions confirms the romantic comment to be his true feelings. And of course, it's romantic because it has to do with him. But that's okay. It's the fungus apocalypse, and Bill could have done worse. I mean, he really could have done worse. Bill, on the other hand, is very much quiet and reserved. He has a fair amount of paranoia, but he's aware of others. This is evidenced when he meets Frank and takes all precaution to keep them both safe rather than just being concerned with his own well-being. Bill's character is also shown from the time when he's introduced in his bunker. He watches while others are rounded up, but he's not planning a rescue. This shows that he isn't concerned about others, as evidenced by his letter later on in the show.
I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died.
As well as during his dinner with Joel and Tess.
I don't need you or your friend complicating our lives.
However, Bill waits patiently for the last of the soldiers to leave. He only has his gun if he needs it, and he isn't using the apocalypse as an excuse to live out a fantasy. He's ultimately a decent guy who has some paranoia and maybe hatred of people. And he's shown this way until the very end of the show. The tension from this show very much comes from how characters interact with one another. From those silent moments where we're not sure what one character will do, to those dynamic moments of yelling and screaming. Even the moments when characters are drawn to one another, the audience will be captured. The best way to accomplish this is to have strong, consistent characters. No matter the situation, no matter who they're around, the decisions made should make sense within that character's moral framework. Like the moon's effect on the tide, our effect on one another is invisible. Our wills bending and flexing with one another. And even though we can't see this struggle, we can feel it. No matter what an author may write, be it horror or sci-fi, with human characters or anthropomorphized ones, consistent characters are a must for solid engagement from the audience. Even if the audience cares more about concepts or action than character, the natural tension formed between humans will carry the audience's attention through to the end. One of the reasons why stories are so enjoyable is because we can live vicariously through the characters, feeling enough of what they must be experiencing that we can enjoy the ride without fear of the consequences. So in crafting a character, be sure to make them based. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.